And you've arrived at this video, congratulations. What it means is that you noticed something about your type that was not quite as it should be. And that means that you are increasingly sensitive to type. One of my cute little catchphrases is that as your journey as a typographer progresses, you start caring less and less about the fonts you're picking. It's not that you don't care about fonts anymore, but you're thinking about that less. And you're thinking more about the space around those fonts, the space between words and letters and between uh, lines of type and columns of type and all like that there. Now, the problem we're going to solve today is the problem of rivers and gullies. And I have a layer in this document. I'm not a big layer guy usually, but let me turn on this big layer. Well, actually, let me just explain it first. So this is type is justified. And so when InDesign pushes these words to the edges to fill out that full measure, except for the last line, of course, there is a version of justification that will push all those lines to the complete length, and I would say that's a feature that is useful approximately twice a year, but it's nice that it's there for those times. But usually you're ending with a flush left line, but the rest are being pushed. And the only way InDesign can do that is by putting air into that those lines, and how and where it puts that air can create a type that is, in this case, full of what a typographer would call rivers and gullies, these big gaps between spaces. And you can imagine, let me just turn on that layer for a minute. You can see dots, and you can almost like connect the dots from those white spaces, and that's why it's called rivers and gullies. It's almost like rivers running through your type, and it makes it splotchy looking. Typographers talk about color when it comes to text type, and they talk about having a nice even color. And if we took a picture of this, a slightly out of focus picture of this, if you can imagine, or took this and blurred it out in Photoshop, we would have a blotchy color here. And what we want is a smoother color. Now, this problem is exacerbated because I have turned hyphenation off. So the computer also cannot break words. Now, I find that a lot of students have turned hyphenation off because a previous instructor, yes, in my institution, previous instructor told them that they should never hyphenate. And what I would have to say about that advice is that it is wrong. Or to put it another way, it's something that really you have to decide for yourself. There is no such thing as perfect typography. Typography is always about compromise. And if you are solving one problem, which is rivers and gullies, in this case, you may have to introduce something that someone else thinks is a problem, which is hyphenation. I think teachers should be helping you to decide, or giving you the advantages and disadvantages of hyphenation versus no hyphenation. But I think that really, ultimately, it's you that has to decide what is important to you, whether it's hyphenation or whether it's an even color or whatever it is that your typographical priorities are. But I would say that most magazines and newspapers, almost all of them, hyphenate, and if they are setting justified type, you really have to hyphenate at least a little bit so you don't get these big gaps in here. So I'm going to work on this type, and we're going to look at a couple of menus inside the style sheet for this. And this is another reason why it's important to have style sheets, so you can do this universally. And we're going to look at a couple of things. So I'm just going to go into my paragraph style, and I'm going to say style options. And here it is. So the first thing is hyphenation, and I've turned it off because I've seen this a lot of times in student work. And I'm just going to turn that back on. And already, if you looked around, you saw some stuff shifting around. And already this is looking a little bit better. Like this artificial intelligence here, we bring the word from up, or oh no, that's how it happens. That got broken, but it gets a little bit more even. It's still kind of blotchy. Those are still some pretty serious rivers going through it. So hyphenation is a fairly crude tool, but we could say we want better spacing. And that sometimes does something, sometimes doesn't, depending on your text and the words in that particular bit. We can look at these. We could say hyphenate words with at least 6 letters. I could change that down to 5. I wouldn't want to go much below 5. In this case, that doesn't do anything. We want at least 3 letters before the hyphen, and we want at least 2 letters after the hyphen. And this is also saying how many hyphens can we have in a row. It's not limits in a paragraph, but how many can you have one after the other. And so here it is in play, as those are 2 hyphens. And you can probably wouldn't go much above 3, but that did make a little bit of difference. You did see stuff shifting around when we turned that up to 3. But if you have stacks of 4 or 5 hyphens, it does look, some people will call that a ladder, and it does look bad. But that helped a little bit. And where we're going to go next, right below it, is justification. And this will help a little bit more. And this is not a super intuitive menu the first time you see it. So it really requires a little bit of explanation. So in essence, and these are, I think, InDesign's default values, I tried to set this to InDesign's default, is controlling how much space you can have between individual letters and words. And I'm going to change these to values that work for me, because I tend to like type that's a little bit more tightly set. But if different decisions were made, it could be done a little bit differently, and maybe we'll go through a couple of those scenarios. So here's what this is this is saying how much space can we have between words? Well, the minimum. And what is this of? Well, every typeface, and every typeface is a little bit different, has a different amount of ideal space built into it. Whoever designed that typeface also designed the original spaces. And to my eye, most text fonts are a little bit looser than I like them personally, but other people would disagree with that. So what InDesign is saying is we can squeeze those words as tight as 80%, and as loose as 175%. And so that's a lot where those rivers are coming from, is that big 175% number. So I'm going to start to change those. And as I said, I like a little bit of loose type. So so I'm actually going to make my maximum 100, my desired 90, and my minimum 75. So let's click out of that and see. I saw a little bit of stuff shifting around there on the side. So that's good. It's better, but it's still a little bit rivery. So I am going to also change my letter spacing. So I'm going to change my minimum to -4, because I only want it to tighten. I'm going to change my desired to -2, and I'll leave my maximum at 0. And now you can see, at least on screen, we have what looks like a much more even color. Now, some people would change this to like a positive, or change that to a positive to give this software a little bit more flexibility. And you can see things are shifting around a little bit. But these are the numbers that look best to my eye. As far as yours, you just have to play around with it. And as far as the typeface you work with, some typefaces require a little bit more tightening, some require a little bit less. But that's one way to get a significantly more even color with your body copy.